Hollow Knight Silksong finally launched after years of anticipation, and the reception has been massive. The combat feels sharp, the world is mysterious, and Hornet brings a fresh identity compared to the Knight's journey in the first game. But right on the heels of its release, Team Cherry has already announced something that I think is a mistake. The decision to nerf two of the game's early bosses, Moorwing and Sister Splinter. Now, I know some players probably breathed a sigh of relief hearing that patch notes mentioned reduced difficulty. Maybe they thought these bosses were roadblocks. Maybe they bounced off of them a few too many times and got frustrated. But in my view, the decision to nerf these fights, bosses that already had incredibly simple and learnable attack patterns, is a step in the wrong direction. In this video, I want to break down why I think this nerf is unnecessary, why these bosses were fine as they were, and what it means for the future of Silksong and difficulty-driven games in general. Hollow Knight's legacy has always been built on the principle of earned mastery, from False Knight to the Radiance, but the game presented challenges that looked intimidating at first, but were always beatable with patience and practice. Bosses weren't complex. They didn't drown players in dozens of attacks or mechanics. Instead, they relied on a handful of moves that were both easy to understand but hard to execute under pressure. That's what made victory so satisfying. You weren't just beating a boss, you were beating yourself, your nerves, your impatience. Moorwing and Sister Splinter continue this tradition. Their moveset is very simple. Their telegraphs are very clear. The real test isn't whether you can memorize them, also you can though in a few tries. The real test is whether you can stay calm long enough to apply what you've learned. You enter the fight, maybe lose a few times, but every defeat is a lesson. The dive comes faster than you expected, next time dodge earlier. The slam caught you off guard, you'll spot the animation quicker this time. Slowly, patterns click into place. That process, that repetition and recognition is the heart of Hollow Knight's philosophy. When a studio nerfs bosses like these, they cut that learning loop short. The very thing that makes victories meaningful, the fact that you failed, adapted, and eventually triumphed, is weakened. Beating Moorwing or Sister Splinter after the nerf won't feel like the same kind of achievement now, and that's where I think Team Cherry miscalculated. Yes, nerfing makes the game more approachable on paper. Yes, it means fewer players will quit in frustration early on, but at what cost? If fights stop pushing you, if you don't have to wrestle with your own impatience and hesitation, then the emotional payoff disappears. Accessibility is important, but accessibility through nerfing isn't the answer. It's about helping players rise to meet the bar. This is why the decision to nerf Moorwing and Sister Splinter matters. What kind of message will this send? That Team Cherry is willing to dilute the difficulty instead of trusting players to grow? That's a dangerous precedent. Once you start softening fights to appease complaints, where does it stop? Will mid-game encounters be nerfed next? Late-game challenges? Hollow Knight earned respect because it trusted players. Silksong risks losing that respect if it forgets that difficulty is not a flaw, it's the very feature that defines the experience. Let's talk specifics. Moorwing. Moorwing is essentially a warm-up fight. Its design is about spacing and reaction. The boss has a few swooping dives, a projectile spread, and some melee swipes. Nothing in its kit is unpredictable or overloaded. If anything, it's one of the most telegraphed bosses in the early game. You can see every move coming from a mile away. You can even request help from an NPC to fight for you. So the challenge isn't complexity, it's your nerves. Players new to Silksong may not yet be comfortable with Hornet's mobility or the rhythm of dodging versus counterattacking. Moorwing punishes hesitation, but once you recognize the pattern, the fight becomes almost rhythmic. It's a training tool disguised as a threat. Nerfing it robs players of that vital early lesson, that this game is about observation and composure. Now, Sister Splinter is a little trickier. This boss introduces multi-directional pressure. The attacks can come from odd angles, and players have to pay attention to spacing in a tighter arena. But again, the patterns are limited. 3 swipes, summon vines, minions, that's it. The repetition means you can memorize them in minutes. The real challenge is endurance. You're asked to keep your focus across multiple cycles without panicking. And honestly, that's a fair ask for a game that's built on Hollow Knight's DNA. Sister Splinter doesn't cheat, doesn't overwhelm you with mechanics, and doesn't hide its moves. It just demands that you keep calm and consistent. Calling these fights too hard feels a bit disingenuous. They're tough in the sense that all Hollow Knight bosses are tough, but they're not unfair, and they don't gate progress any more than False Knight or Hornet did in the original. Difficulty is one of the most hotly debated topics in game design today. We see it in conversations about FromSoft games, about Celeste, about Metrovanias in general. The question is always, should games have easier modes, or should they preserve the original intent of their design? Team Cherry always leaned towards integrity. Hollow Knight didn't have difficulty sliders. It didn't compromise its vision. If you wanted to progress, you had to adapt. That's what gave the game its reputation and staying power. By nerfing Moorwing or Sister Splinter, even slightly, Team Cherry does risk stepping away from that identity. It's not a massive compromise yet, but it is a signal. If the early bosses are fair game for nerfs, what about the mid game? What about the late game challenges? Where does it stop? I'm not saying accessibility isn't important. Games should be approachable, but approachability doesn't mean that you have to lower difficulty. It can mean better tutorials, clearer telegraphs, more checkpoints. Nerfing bosses isn't accessibility, it's compromise, and compromise rarely leads to greatness. There's also a broader industry context here. Indie studios like Team Cherry are often praised because they don't follow the same trends as big studios. They stick to their vision, they don't water things down to please everyone. That's what made Hollow Knight feel refreshing in the first place. But now, with Silksong under massive scrutiny, one of the most anticipated indie games of all time, I worry that Team Cherry is starting to buckle under the pressure. When you know millions of players are waiting, when the internet is dissecting every design choice, the temptation to appease everyone grows stronger. The problem is, you can't. A game that tries to please everyone pleases no one. And by nerfing bosses that were already fair, Team Cherry risks losing the respect of the very community that elevated them in the first place. So if nerfing isn't the answer, what could Team Cherry have done? Encourage patience, adding tips through NPC dialogue or lore that gently nudges players towards observation and practice. Improving checkpointing. If frustration was the issue, allowing quicker retries or slightly closer benches would ease tension without touching the boss design. Although I do think that the benches are very well laid out and there is quite enough benches. Personal opinion. Clarifying telegraphs. If attacks felt unclear, polishing the animations would solve it without removing difficulty. These solutions would preserve the integrity of the bosses while still addressing player frustration. Nerfing is the bluntest tool possible, and it feels like the least inspired option. Here's the core of my critique. This isn't just about two bosses, it's about trust. Trust between developer and player. Hollow Knight earned that trust because it didn't flinch. It trusted players to rise to the occasion. Silksong needs to maintain that same confidence. If Team Cherry keeps nerfing fights in response to feedback, the whole structure of the game risks collapsing. Progression will feel uneven, victories will feel hollow, and the reputation of Silksong, a game that people waited years for, will suffer. Silksong has the potential to be every bit as legendary as Hollow Knight, but to do that, it has to stay true to itself. It has to remember that difficulty isn't the enemy, difficulty is the heart of what makes the experience memorable. To sum this up, I believe nerfing Moorwing and Sister Splinter is a mistake. These bosses were already simple, already fair, and already designed to teach players how to engage with Silksong's combat. Their movesets were straightforward, their patterns were easy to learn, and the only thing they demanded was practice. By lowering their difficulty, Team Cherry has compromised on the very design philosophy that made Hollow Knight great. It sends the wrong message to players, undermines the satisfaction of victory, and risks setting a precedent for future changes that could dilute Silksong's identity. I'm not angry at Team Cherry. I still think they're one of the best indie studios in the world, but I am disappointed. I think this patch represents a lack of confidence in the players, and in the long run, I don't believe that's healthy for the game or the community. Difficulty isn't a flaw, it's a feature, and in the world of Hollow Knight and Silksong, it's the feature that matters most. But on the topic of disappointing companies, I do go over Nintendo's new patent that just got approved that allows them to sue studios for using a creature summoning mechanic in their game. I go over that and more in this video over here. So like, comment, subscribe. Thanks for watching. My name's Vinsuka. I'll see you on the next one. See ya.